All right, guys, every year, one of the most common questions is, what is a hunt that you can do that won't break the bank? Or how can you apply in the West without breaking the bank? It's a pretty common question. It's one that I go through every single year. I try to apply as much as I can in as many states and as many species as I can, but I don't have unlimited budget. So I wanted to run through, do a little video on what states I think you ought to be looking at and applying for, building some points, and then maybe even going on some hunts. In saying that, if you plan to come out and hunt the West, you're primarily looking at deer, elk, and antelope. Those are your most economical species. You can pretty typically spend about $1,000, maybe over slightly depending on what you apply for. But I would say for the most part, you're probably looking at around that $1,000 budget, especially if you start looking at elk hunting opportunities. So with that, I'm gonna run through some states that I think you ought to be applying for, you ought to be building some points for, that are a little bit more economical friendly. I tried to weigh opportunity versus cost. So these are kind of the opportunities that I think have the best cost benefit analysis. So these are hunts that you can do relatively quickly, quite often, and that are a little bit more on the economical side in compared to some other hunts. All right, the first state I would include is Colorado. And we pick on Colorado quite a bit, and that's primarily because it's a good opportunity to go hunting. They have a lot of elk, 300,000 counted last year, which is the highest number of elk, I believe, in history in Colorado. So they've got a lot of elk. They have great mule deer hunting, and a lot of people don't really know, but you also have pretty good antelope hunting opportunities. So I would put those three species on your list for sure in the state of Colorado. Now, when we talk about economics and cost to apply, cost of permits, every state is going to cost you maybe $100, maybe a little bit more, but typically you can plan on spending about that much just to apply and get in the system. Colorado's no different. You have to buy an annual hunting license, which is a small game license, they call it. It's about $93.78 for a non-resident. You're also gonna pay some smaller fees like a habitat stamp, which I believe is about $11.50. You're gonna pay a search and rescue fee, which is like $1.50, and maybe some other small fees when you actually get into that system and apply. You also have to apply with an application fee, which is going to be $10 per species for deer, elk, and antelope. So when you apply, you have to buy that, you have to front that, that's non-refundable, it's out the gate, you can just plan on spending that. And then you can apply for hunting licenses. Now, if you were to draw a hunting license in the state of Colorado, a deer tag is about $481, an elk tag, you're talking $803, antelope tag, you're about $454, $455. Now, Colorado is a true preference point state, so you can kind of predict on when you're going to draw depending on the hunt that you're applying for, because those permits are allocated to the people with the most points that apply. So you can kind of predict, figure out how long you're going to have to apply to draw any given hunt. In saying that, they offer a lot of opportunities. They offer archery, muzzleloader, rifle. There's a lot of chances to go hunting, and a lot of permits can be drawn with very few points, even 0 points. There's deer tags, there's elk tags, there's even some antelope tags that you can draw with very few points. Deer and elk, there's hunts you can go on every single year if you want to, especially this year with the archery hunts going to non-residents in a draw. There's no more over-the-counter opportunity in Colorado for non-resident archery elk. So you can plan on applying for those, and a lot of those tags that have just been converted from OTC to draw tags, those are gonna be available with very little to no points at all. So for around $1,000, you can plan on going on an elk hunt this year in Colorado. If you wanted to hunt deer, it's going to be about $480 plus the cost of the annual hunting license. I would say all in, you're going to be about $600 if you want to go on a deer hunt, and probably about that same amount, maybe slightly less for an antelope hunt. So really the thing that you want to do is you want to dive into your draw odds. You want to look at the hunts that are available in Colorado. And at minimum, I would tell you, buy the annual hunting license, apply for those hunts. And if you don't draw, or even if you apply for a preference point only, you're going to get a preference point for those species and start to build opportunities over time. The next state that I would put in this list would be Montana. And again, I picked Montana because there's a lot of opportunity to hunt. They have general season deer, they have general season elk, and they also have what they call a general season big game combo, which is one permit that allows you to hunt both deer and elk. So it's a really good opportunity. The other great thing about Montana is that if you draw that general season combo, whether it's deer, elk, or the big game combo, you can actually go up and bow hunt. And if you're unsuccessful, you could go back and rifle hunt until you filled your permit. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of units that are just general season hunting. If you want to just get a chance to go out and hunt deer, I think it's one of the best opportunities. You're probably not going to kill the buck of your lifetime, but they have long seasons. They have good harvest success. They've got a good number of deer. And I think to get out west and get a chance to go hunting, I think Montana represents an awesome opportunity to experience hunting. So with that, the cost to apply, it depends on what you do. So you do have to buy a base hunting license, which is going to be about $15. You have to buy a conservation license, which is $10. You're going to pay an application fee, which is about $5 per species. You're going to pay a small service fee when you go ahead and apply. And the big hang up for Montana is that you do have to front the cost of those general season combo that you apply for. So if you apply for the elk combo, you're going to have to front the cost of that, which is about $1,078. If you apply for the deer combo, it's going to be $744. If you apply for the big game combo, which is deer and elk, it's going to be $1,278. So you do have to front that. Now, if you're unsuccessful in the draw, they would refund you the cost of that minus the lesser fees, which is your base hunting license, conservation license, those kinds of things. But as I said, for the most part, it's a pretty economic opportunity to get out and go hunting, especially for that big game combo where you get both a deer and an elk tag and you get a chance to go hunting both species in Montana. So you do have to have a credit card. You're going to have to plan on fronting those fees, but in reality, it's a pretty good opportunity to just put a tag in your pocket and get a chance to go hunting for not a ton of money. Montana is another state that runs on a point system. So we've covered this in other videos, but you do have a preference point system for those general season combo tags. You also have a bonus point system for the special limited entry opportunities. And those are tags that they kind of set aside for a better quality. Now you can simply buy a preference point for $100 as a non-resident in the off season, if you will. So during the summer time frame, they have a point only purchase time frame where you can buy a preference point. So Montana is a great opportunity state. You can plan on spending, depending on what you want to hunt, about $1,000, maybe slightly over if you go for that deer elk combo, but definitely put Montana on your list, whether you're applying and trying to draw the general season combo. Maybe you also want to apply for the limited quota tags, which is not that much more to apply for, and the cost is essentially the same should you draw one of those. Antelope is relatively cheap to hunt there. Just plan on applying and building points at a minimum in Montana, and I would definitely put it up there near the top of the list as far as cost benefit analysis. The next state I have on my list is Wyoming. Wyoming is a little bit like Montana in that you have to front the cost of the tags that you apply for. Now, if you don't draw those tags, they're going to refund you that cost minus the application fee and a process fee. So to actually apply for tags in Wyoming, it's relatively cheap. It's a $15 application fee per species. You do have to pay a 2.5% processing fee, and that's on top of fronting the cost of whatever license that you applied for. So there is a cost, but it's cheaper than a lot of other states. In addition, Wyoming is a preference point state, meaning they take a large portion of the permits and they guarantee those to the people with the most points that apply. There's also a random portion of that draw. So you could draw any year in the random draw, but you will probably end up having to build some preference points to guarantee yourself a tag. You can buy those preference points in the summer during the preference point only time frame, which typically is about July to the end of October. So I'm going to cover the cost of the preference point fees first, and then I'll dive into some of the actual permit fees themselves should you draw. So the cost of a preference point for antelope in Wyoming is $31. The preference point fee for mule deer in Wyoming is $41, and the preference point fee for elk is going to be $52. So out of pocket, you're going to be about $128, $130 if you decide to go ahead and purchase preference points for those three species alone and just build points for the future. Now, if you want to actually apply in the draw, I already stated you have to front the cost of that until they do the draw, and then if you're unsuccessful, they're going to refund you the cost of those permits. So there are two different pools in Wyoming that you can apply for as a non-resident. They call it a regular and a special pool. Those permits are exactly the same. The only difference is is that the special permits cost more. And they do that because they want to offer people that are willing to pay a higher price for that permit better odds in the draw. And for every species, it's a little bit different on how much better your odds might be. For antelope, there are definitely fewer people that are willing to pay a higher price to hunt that species. When you're talking elk and mule deer, it depends a little bit on the unit. The best units, there's a lot of people that are willing to pay maximum amount to hunt those because they're hard to draw. Some of the units you do have slightly better odds. So that's a decision you'll have to make whether you want to go into the regular or special draw. And you can really look into that by diving into your insider account and looking at the draw odds. Now let's look at some of the prices that are associated with some of these. So a regular draw antelope license in Wyoming is only $326 for a non-resident, which is relatively cheap in my opinion. Once you jump up to the special draw for antelope, you're going to be into that $1,200 for an antelope. There was a time in my life, not that long ago, when I thought that was asinine for an antelope tag, that I would never pay $1,200, and some of you might be saying the same thing right now. But if you look at the cost of a landowner tag or the opportunity to go hunt somebody's private piece of property in New Mexico, the cost of those tags is going to be in excess of $1,200. So reality, my opinion's kind of changed. It's really not too bad, but you probably will have to save some money and put some priority into that. And like I said, $1,200 for an antelope tag sounds like a lot. It is a lot, I understand that, but I still think it's a decent bargain to get a chance to go hunt antelope in Wyoming. When you jump into deer, the deer regular permit cost is going to be $374. Isn't too bad. You jump up to the special permit, you're looking at that $1,200 mark again for deer. When you look at elk, so the cost of a regular draw elk license is going to be $692. Again, not too bad in comparison to some of the other states, but where it gets really scary is when you jump up to the special draw for elk, and the cost of that tag is going to be $1,950. So you're looking at $2,000 for a special elk license in Wyoming. The odds are slightly better. You really want to look at it. The odds, that's going to be really important to helping you make a decision. You could, in reality, hunt quite often in Wyoming if you're willing to pay that extra price. And again, I know this video is supposed to be about economics. It's just one of those things you got to make a decision on how important it is to you. Wyoming does represent a really good chance to go hunting. I still think it's probably one of the best mixes of draw odds versus trophy potential. Those general season units up there are still really good as far as trophy potential, number of elk, number of antelope, number of deer goes. So you just got to look at it. There are some other fees that are slightly associated with it. Conservation stamp. In reality, you're going to be into it about $130 in Wyoming annually. And again, you just got to be prepared to front the cost of those permits if you apply in the draw. So I put Wyoming on the list because I do still think it represents a good chance to go hunting. And I think as far as cost goes in the regular draw, it's competitive with other states. It's actually pretty decent. When you jump up into that special draw, it's definitely not quite as affordable, but it might be worth it to you because you may not have to wait so long to get a permit and go hunting. So take a look at Wyoming. The next state that I included on the list is one that people may not have associated with this economics and hunting opportunities, but that state is New Mexico. So the reason that people might not think about New Mexico is because there is no bonus point or preference point system. It is a completely random draw. So whether you started applying this year or you've been applying since 2000, which is when I kind of got into the mix, you're not penalized. Your odds are exactly the same. The reason I included it in this video is because it's relatively cheap to apply in New Mexico. So you do have to buy a hunting license, which is going to be $65. You have an application fee of $13 per species. You have a habitat stamp, which is $10. You also have a habitat management and access fee, which is $4. But in reality, for about $118, you can apply for any and all species that you're interested in New Mexico. Again, there is a little bit of a caveat in that you do have to front the cost of the permits that you apply for, similar to Wyoming, similar to Montana general season combo tags. And that can get really expensive if you plan on applying for any and all species. For that reason, I've primarily limited my applications in New Mexico to 4 species, and that is deer, elk, antelope, and Barbary sheep. Now, when you look at the cost of the permits that you're going to have to front in New Mexico, you might see some variation, and you start running into these terms like standard or quality or high demand. So New Mexico actually breaks out their hunts into different categories, and the different categories cost different prices. So a standard hunt, which is just a standard hunt, it's more of an opportunity style hunt, that fee is going to be less. When you jump up into the high demand and quality hunts, those permits are going to be more expensive. Either one, because it's a quality hunt that the state is managing for a better opportunity for a bigger animal, more mature animal, less pressure in the field, or a high demand, meaning that there are non-residents that are increasing the demand in that unit. And the cost of those permits are different. The high demand and the quality are one price, the standard is a separate price. So I'm gonna dive into those. So the deer standard price is gonna be $270, which is really pretty dang cheap if you want to apply for a standard deer tag in New Mexico. When you jump up to the quality high demand deer hunts, the cost of those is going to be $355, which again, still not too bad as a non-resident. When you look at elk, the elk standard fee is going to be $535. When you look at the quality or high demand permits, those are going to be $760, which is on par with a state like Colorado, kind of the regular draw price in Wyoming. So it's relatively competitive, not a bad deal, especially if you draw one of those quality or high demand permits, because those are really good hunts in my opinion. Antelope, the cost of that is going to be $270. That's just one standard fee. There's no standard or high quality distinction for antelope. And Barbary sheep, again, no standard or high quality distinction. The cost of that permit is going to be $360. So you kind of have to decide what's more important to you. In my opinion, I think if you confront the cost of those four species at a minimum, it's worth it because it increases your chances of drawing a tag of some sort of one of those. And the hunting in New Mexico is really good. They have opportunity style deer hunts. They have really good elk hunting. They have a multitude of seasons, including early archery, second archery. A lot of areas have muzzleloader rifle hunts, late muzzleloader hunts in some units. Some units even have a late archery hunt. So there's a lot of opportunities to apply. The other thing about New Mexico that I like is that you get 3 choices for every species that you apply for, and they consider all 3 of your choices before moving to the next applicant. So I do feel like it's a good cost benefit. I feel like my chances, if I'm smart with my application, of drawing a tag are pretty good, and the entry fee is really not too bad at about $118, $120 out of pocket. So that's why I included New Mexico. I would strongly encourage you take a good hard look at New Mexico and consider applying at a minimum. The last state that I had on my list, I kind of debated on whether to include it or not, but I do think it's a good opportunity and I do think there's a good cost benefit. And that's Arizona. So Arizona, you have to buy a $160 non-resident hunting license in order to apply. And once you buy that, you can apply for any and all species in the state that you're interested in, including elk, antelope, deer, bighorn sheep. You could apply for javelina, you could apply for bison if you want. So it's kind of expensive to get into that. You're also going to have to pay a $15 application fee per species. But where I really think the value comes is when you start looking at the license prices should you draw. So a deer license is $300 for a non-resident, which isn't really too bad. You look at an elk tag, $650. I didn't include the cost of a bighorn sheep tag. Obviously that's expensive. Javelina tag, $100. They're a fun little animal to go hunt in kind of an odd time of the year. Usually those are winter hunts, January through spring. So that might be a species you might consider on a budget. The real reason I included Arizona is because there are opportunities to hunt deer pretty regularly, especially if you get into Coues deer hunting. There's a lot of Coues deer hunts that can be drawn with almost no points. The other thing I like about Arizona is that there is a portion, 80% of their permits are randomly allocated. They are going to take into account the number of bonus points you have, so it's going to increase your odds as you continue to accrue bonus points, but there is that random component of the draw. The other thing I like about Arizona when I look at the elk hunting opportunities is that a lot of the late season hunts, rifle, archery, those are available to folks with far fewer points. They don't take decades and decades of applying to draw. You can plan on going to those maybe every 10 years or so. So I definitely think Arizona is worth it. The cost of getting into it, like I said, $160 per year. Seems steep, but in reality, I think the chance to go hunting specifically for deer is really good. So that's why I included Arizona in this list. So that kind of wraps up the states that I think should be the top of your list as far as making that analysis of cost versus benefit. There's a bunch of states that I didn't include, and I think it's probably just as important to tell you why I didn't include those. So I'm going to run through those. So the first being Nevada. I didn't include Nevada because the cost of applying is relatively high versus the opportunity to actually draw tags as a non-resident. So you do have to buy a hunting license there. You're going to pay application fees. It is a bonus point random draw state, so you do always have a chance to draw, but the odds for the most part are really low. The only exception to that is if you're a diehard bow hunter. There are some mule deer hunts that you can draw pretty regularly with very few bonus points. There's some archery antelope tags that might be available to you if you're a bow hunter. But when you start looking at elk, bighorn sheep, your opportunity to draw a tag as a non-resident is really low, and it is pretty expensive to pay that annually. So that's the reason I didn't include Nevada. Utah. I didn't include Utah, which is my home state. Normally I would include Utah, and I would tell you it's kind of on the fence. You might want to make a decision based on the amount of money that you have to put towards this kind of thing. So you do have to buy a hunting license as a non-resident, which is $120. And you can apply for any and all species after that for a minimal application cost. So it's not that expensive to actually get into and apply for. But when you start looking at the odds for species like limited entry elk, limited entry deer, bighorn sheep, moose, bison, mountain goat, the odds of drawing those tags is really low. Now, general season deer hunting, there are hunts you can do with very few preference points in the state of Utah. You'd want to look at the draw odds, and you would want to decide how many years it's going to take you and if it's worth it to you to buy that $120 hunting license to then apply. It might take you 3, 4, 5 years depending on the hunt you're looking for to draw that. So you might be invested into that $600, $700 before you actually drew a general season deer tag, depending on the weapon you're hunting. So that's the reason I didn't include Utah. It just doesn't have great draw odds for non-residents for most species. It might be worth it for general season deer, but it's definitely one you want to think about. The other state I didn't include, which I debated on, was Idaho. Now, the reason I didn't include Idaho is because the sale date for over-the-counter general season deer and elk licenses has already passed. That was back in December, November timeframe. I can't remember off the top of my head. It seems so long ago. But rolling into next year, if they do their system the same way, I do think it would be worth buying the $185 hunting license and then trying to buy a general season over-the-counter deer or elk license as a non-resident. Now, since that's already passed, I didn't include Idaho because I don't necessarily think that the draw odds for the controlled deer, elk, and antelope hunts are good enough for the most part to justify the cost of the hunting license to get into that state. The other thing about Idaho is it is completely random draw. There's no point system, which I like in New Mexico. I don't like it as much in Idaho because the cost of the hunting license is more than double. So I didn't include Idaho because it is expensive, and I just don't really think that the benefit is quite there. Other states I didn't include: Oregon, Washington, California. Those states for non-resident are just too expensive versus the opportunity that you get to go hunting. Now, they do have some chances that you can get an elk tag. The Oregon's got the coast with the rosies. You can buy a permit over the counter. That might be worth exploring too if you got nothing else going. But generally speaking, for their draw tags in those 3 states, I wouldn't worry about it if you're a non-resident. Now, for residents, I think it's probably worth it. Non-residents, not so much. So that's kind of a wrap up on what I think are the best cost benefit states to apply for and try to hunt. Now, I got the question, and this is one I wanted to answer. If I had $1,000 and I wanted to spend it on a Western big game hunt, what would I do personally? In my opinion, I would do Montana general big game combo. I would try to draw that permit. Now, you're going to be slightly over $1,000. You're going to be $1,300-ish. But if you draw that, you're going to get a chance to hunt both deer and elk, which I think is a really good opportunity. The other thing about that permit is if you draw it, you're going to get a chance to hunt archery until you fill your permit. And then if you don't, you can go back and hunt with a rifle. There's good populations, good trophy potential, and there's a lot of general season units that you can hunt. So that would probably be right near the very tip top of my list. Very close, maybe second place, maybe even first place. It's really close, would be elk in Colorado. So elk in Colorado, you can still buy over the counter a second and third rifle season tag for $800. That's a pretty good deal. It's an opportunity to go hunt branch antlered bulls. The other opportunity for you is to apply in the draw and actually draw a tag in Colorado. And there are many archery tags that can be drawn with 0 to maybe a couple points. So that's the other hunt that I would put right up there. I'm an elk guy. There's opportunities if you want to go deer hunting, and you can explore those in the video. But if it were me, I had $1,000 to spend, those would be the two top of my list. Montana big game combo, Colorado elk. And I would get a chance to go out and hunt the best species in the West, which is elk. All right, guys, so that's a wrap on that. If you got questions, drop them. I'm sure you do. I'd be happy to answer them. You can also reach out to me via DM on Instagram. I would love it if you guys would like, subscribe, give us a little smash of the subscribe button. It helps us do more videos like this. Overall, good luck in the draws. Good luck in getting permits.